Greece, then she went to Japan for 3 years, then to the US, then to Japan, then to the US. So I think it's hard to imagine somebody with a better life history to inform some of the work she's going to be sharing with us. I asked her about how she got interested in psychology, and she talked about working in a residential treatment center when she was in college and how much that inspired her to think about how different people cope and how we help that process. And I asked her about a big picture puzzle she wanted to solve, and you will see that she's well on her way to working on this one here. She's really interested in the immigrant paradox, and she's interested in the strengths and weaknesses that come with immigration. So we're looking forward to hearing this.
Hi everyone, my name is Aya, and the title of my talk is Language Switching and Emotion Expression in Bilingual Immigrant Families. I'd like to begin with one clinical story. Like many trainees in this room, I've been working in a psychology clinic for about a year, and I was working with a 14-year-old Mexican-American female with difficulties of attention and depressive symptoms. In one of the sessions, she became visibly frustrated, irritated, and yelled out, "Mira," or "look," in Spanish. And that caught my attention, given that all of the sessions up until then have been done in English only, and I don't fluently speak Spanish. Mainstream theories of communication argue that we speak in order to be maximally understood by our listeners. So why did she switch into Spanish, and what was the function of that language switch in relation to her emotions? So let's begin with how we learn our languages. When we're acquiring our first language, we go through two parallel processes of conceptual development and affective linguistic conditioning. So by that I mean conceptual development, we first acquire the explicit denotative meaning of the word. So for example, spider, S-P-I-D-E-R, means 8-legged insect with fangs and may inject venom. At the same time, you go through affective linguistic conditioning, where you're learning the implicit connotative meaning of the word through emotionally charged experiences and memories. So you're 4 years old, playing in the playground, and this giant furry thing crawls up your legs, bites you, and it really, really hurts. Now you've learned to associate the word spider with negative emotions like fear. So Pavlenko 2005 argues that because of this style of learning, that there are different degrees of emotionality associated with their first and second languages. So let's look at how we're learning our second language. We still go through the process of conceptual development, often in the form of defining, translating, and memorizing. So we learn that the English word spider means araña in Spanish. But then there is this reduced limbic involvement of the limbic system, or reduced emotional involvement, when we're learning in, for instance, this decontextualized language classroom. So again, Pavlenko argues that because of this, there might be different degrees of emotionality associated with their first and second languages. And there's quite a bit of research evidence from different areas of psychology supporting this idea, but I'll just focus on two. So first, in the largest study to date, qualitative study of bilinguals and perceived emotionality, about 1,600 bilingual speakers completed a web questionnaire between 2001 and 2003. And they were asked about different emotional contexts and which language they prefer, and also the perceived emotionality of that first and second language. And across situations, bilingual speakers reported that they favor their first language for the expression of positive and negative emotion. And one immigrant mother reported that when my daughter was born, I was planning to start talking English to her, but I could not. It didn't feel good enough to express what I felt. So it's noteworthy that many bilingual speakers feel that in emotional contexts, speaking in their first language feels natural, internally satisfying, whereas the second language can feel fake and artificial. So these are subjective reports. Hallville Harris and colleagues have been doing laboratory studies looking at how bilingual speakers perceive first language emotion words and second language emotion words in relation to their skin conductance response. So this is electrodermal reactivity, and it's one peripheral index of emotional arousal. And we see that in this particular example, we see that when bilingual speakers are perceiving their first language emotion words, it's much stronger, and this difference is strongest for topic, reprimands, and taboo words. And I think it's also striking that they've been doing these series of studies, and they see that in late bilinguals, this difference shows, but in early bilinguals who are acquiring both of these languages early on at the same time in early childhood, this difference does not show. Again, supporting the evidence, or supporting evidence for this theory. So, given all of this evidence, my big question is then, do bilingual speakers actually use their two languages? Do they switch between the first and second language in order to express or potentially control their emotion? So this can be broken down into two different parts. First, do bilingual speakers express positive and negative emotion differently depending on language use? So this would be replicating the findings that we already have from the literature in this particular sample. And then I'm interested in, is code switching associated with expression of positive and negative emotion? So unlike previous studies that have been carried out on adult bilinguals, I'm focusing on parents' child-directed spontaneous speech during parent-child interactions. And unlike self-reports or elicitation of emotion based on single-word tasks, I'm looking at in vivo emotion expression and language production. And I'm systematically comparing the expression of positive and negative emotion, treating them as independent constructs. And finally, I'm focusing on Chinese English, given that much of the studies have been done with European languages like German English or Spanish English. And so Chinese is a different language family altogether. And at the same time, there's also different cultural rules that we were starting to talk about with Hannah's project, so we may see a greater difference. So we looked at a sample of 68 parents and children, and this sample was selected from a larger longitudinal study on Chinese Americans and socio-emotional adjustment. And they were selected specifically because they were using balanced use of Chinese and English in this particular sample. But they were not statistically different from the full sample in terms of sociodemographic variables like language proficiency. So we look at the parents, and these are 88% mothers, 97% of them are born in foreign countries, Chinese-speaking countries, and they've spent about 16 years in the US. And their Chinese is more dominant than their English. And for their children, these are kids between 7 to 9 years old, and they've spent they're about 85% US born, meaning second generation children of immigrants. And looking at their language proficiency, they're actually quite a bit more balanced compared to their parents, and if anything, English is becoming stronger for them. And this is a fairly characteristic sample of Chinese American families, and this is precisely the language gap between the parents and the children that foster the bilingual family environment. So parents and children came into our laboratory to complete this puzzle box task. And so this is a 5-minute task developed by Eisenberg and colleagues to observe the parents' emotion expression with their children. So I have the box here with me. And as you can see, one side of the box, which is clear glass, and the other side, and it has a puzzle in it. The children are asked to complete. So the parents sit on this side, but the children are actually on the cloth side. So they're asked to complete this puzzle within 5 minutes. I feel like a magician or something. But the children are asked to complete these puzzle pieces, but they cannot see anything. And you have the parents' view, where you're verbally instructing me what to do. So as you can imagine, this could be a fun or a frustrating thing for many parents. And so we placed 2 cameras in the room, one on the parent's face and one on the child's face. And so I was primarily interested in 2 types of outcomes. First, parents and children's expression of positive and negative emotion, focusing on their facial emotion expression. So throughout the entirety of the 5-minute task, for every 5 seconds, the parents and the children received a rating between 0 to 3, 0 being neutral, 3 being intense emotion. And global displays of positive emotion included things like smiling, laughter, brightness, alertness, interest, and global displays of negative emotion included behaviors like frowning, pursed lip, tightened jaw, lowered eyebrows. And 2 ethnically Chinese coders rated these videos, and we muted the videos in order to remove the influence of language as well as tone. Second type of behavior I was interested in was language use. So, to what extent in each of these 5-second epochs did the parents use Mandarin or Cantonese or English? And then I was also interested in parents' code switching frequency. So in my study, I'm operationalizing code switching as intrasentential switches between Chinese and English languages. So what do I mean by that? So if I'm speaking English like this, and then in the middle of the sentence, いきなり日本語に switch した場合, that would be an example of an intrasentential code switch. So we looked at every point in time where the switch occurred, and we also looked at the direction of the switches. So at the red line, you can tell this is a switch from Chinese to English. We also looked at, okay, were these switches back from English to Chinese? So this is an example of one fairly frustrated parent-child dyad. And you can see in the blue that parents' negative emotion expression is fluctuating quite a bit between throughout the 5 minutes. And you can also see that in the green line, the child's negative emotion is also fluctuating. And we see a little bit of an overlap between the two. So when looking at the parent's negative emotion expression, I try to control for the child's emotion as a covariate. And then the top black circles indicate every point in which there was a switch. The directionality is not shown here. I conducted a hierarchical linear modeling to look at the epoch levels, so for every 5 seconds, that level of variables and their relationship between parent emotion, parent language, and child emotion. We also had subject level data like socioeconomic status or language proficiency or acculturation, which we use as controlling variables. So let's look at the descriptors of the main variables. As you can tell, the emotion ratings of parents and children are fairly low, but this is actually to be expected in this particular cultural sample. And we see that there's quite a bit of variability from epoch to epoch. The same could be said for the language switches. There was about 1.5 switch for every 5 seconds, but this ranged from 0 to 9. So imagine 9 language switches within 5 seconds. There's quite a bit of rapid firing of the switches, and perhaps for that reason, there's equal proportion of switches from one language to another and then back. So the directionality, there's about equal proportions. So my first question, do bilingual speakers express emotion differently by language use? My hypothesis was that for positive and negative, that would be higher for the first language Chinese. And this is what the data showed. So we saw that yes, for negative emotion expression, the Chinese use is more positively associated. So more Chinese use, more negative emotion expression in parents. But when we look at positive emotion, we saw trends in the other direction. So rather than using Chinese, it looked like parents showed more positive emotions when using English. And so the hypothesis was only partially supported for negative emotion. And that was unexpected, and I was wondering why is that? So first I thought, oh, maybe this is about that parent-child language communication where parents are speaking Chinese, that's the less dominant language for the children, so maybe this results in a language barrier and that's why they're expressing negative emotion. But when I take into account parents' and child's language proficiencies, this effect still remains. Then I thought, okay, well it must be about the parenting practices, that these are bicultural parents, and when they're using Chinese, maybe they're being primed to have this more critical, disciplining, harsh type of parenting, and maybe when they're using English, they're being primed to have this warm, positive, praise type of parenting. But I also looked at the relationship between acculturation and expression of positive, negative emotion, and that relationship is not really there. So then I began to think, could it be that these parents are actually using languages and possibly switching between the languages to control or express their negative emotions specifically? So I hypothesized that switching frequency would be related or would be occurring more in moments of higher negative emotion expression, but that this relationship might not exist for positive emotions. And that's what we found in the data set. So controlling for child's negative emotion, as well as the actual language use, we see that higher higher number of language switching within the 5 seconds is associated with higher negative emotion expression, but this is not related to positive emotion. And I further hypothesize that maybe switches from that second language to the first would be associated with higher negative emotion expression, and switches back from the first to the second language could be related to lower negative emotion expression. And here's what we saw. So we saw that yes, switches from English to Chinese does result in higher negative emotion expression, but that this was not significant for switches from first language Chinese to second language English. And if anything, we actually still see a trend towards higher negative emotion expression. So it's a lot of information. To recap, we see that code switching frequency beyond language choice, beyond child's emotion, does appear to be related to higher negative emotion, unrelated to positive emotion, and maybe this relationship is stronger for directionality of English to Chinese. So what does that all mean? What do we take away from this particular data set? So beyond self-reports and just these single word tasks, we do see that in the moment parent-child interactions, during the in the moment parent-child interactions, that bilingual parents do express emotions differently depending on the language that they're using. Specifically, we see that bilingual parents are expressing more positive and less negative emotion when using English, and more negative and less positive emotion when using Chinese. And having established these differential emotionality of these languages, we see that parents are code switching more during moments of heightened negative emotion expression. So I think there's at least 2 interpretations, and I'd also love to get your feedback on more. But first, it could be that parents are getting dysregulated, or getting frustrated, getting dysregulated. The cognitive resources are being taxed, language functions are compromised, and therefore they're switching to that easier language, that Chinese dominant language. I think that's one interpretation of it. Another interpretation could be that given these are dominant Chinese speakers, and when we look at the language, majority of it is still in Chinese. Every time they're switching, they're embedding English words into their language. And given the literature on this distancing effect of the second language, it could possibly be that they're also trying to downregulate their negative emotion by inserting English into their language. Unfortunately, our data set did not really tease apart the directionality. I remember when we looked at the descriptives, we saw that there was just lots of switching going on in a short period of time, and so we weren't really able to tease apart the directionality, and we saw that for both switches from second language to first language back to second, there's still higher negative emotion expression, and this was stronger for the L2 to L1 direction. So as I'm already starting to address, there is a lot of limitations to this study and definitely much room for future direction, and so I'd love to get your feedback. Because I'm using categorical data, especially for the emotion data on a Likert scale from 0, 1, 2, 3, we weren't really able to look at the change in emotions as a function of language. And at the same time, there were also so many rapid switches, we weren't really able to tease apart the directionality of switching from Chinese to English, indicating certain things like emotion and vice versa. And so my next step, if I do continue this line of research, is really to try to use this language switch and language use and language switch as a mechanism for manipulation to see how it affects changes in emotion. And specifically, I'm really interested in the switch from first language to second language. Could it be a mechanism to reduce or downregulate negative emotion? So the big, so what? A lot of information. Why is any of this important? For all the clinical researchers in the room, the medium of psychotherapy is language. The clients are describing their symptoms through the medium of language, and we're intervening through the medium of language. So if there's one takeaway from this talk, I really would like to shift your attention not only to the content of what your clients are saying, but also the language that they're using. And if you have a bilingual speaker that is conducting their entire therapy just in their second language, there could be reduced emotionality, there could be emotional avoidance. If your bilingual client is switching, then that can be an indicator of changes in emotion. And I operationalize code switching as multiple languages in my study, but the definition of code switching is switches between linguistic varieties. So it could be something like me talking in this formal presentation speech style to switching to the more informal register of how I would speak with my friends and family back home in my own community. So it's not just about bilinguals, but also monolinguals as well. And if we can better learn the relationship between language and emotion, then I think the conventional wisdom of use your words when upset can also be more specific to maybe use your L2 words, use your L1 words. And I think these questions become more and more important as we have more cross-linguistic, cross-cultural families within the US and also around the world. And this is a unique situation where for parents, their second language might actually be the child's first language. So how do parents and children actually try to gap or bridge this language gap? And what does that impact on our emotional expression, control, development? And so this is an area that I really would like to pursue further and would love to get your feedback because I see this really as my first step. So thank you for all of your attention as I go through this process. Of course, for the parents and children who participated in the study, big thanks to them. And then Shane for all of your support and mentorship as I gone through this project. And Mahesh was my secondary advisor. My lab mates, Kathy, Sarah, Kaylee, and Angela. And then my RA coders who are all sitting on this couch right there. Thank you for all your hard work. And most important, well, they're your cohorts. And then most importantly, my husband Blair, for his incredible patience. And when we're about to get into these arguments, I ask him, why did you switch into Japanese? And I'm sure that's not fun to hear, so thank you for your patience. And I'd love to get feedback from all of you. Jake.
Great talk. You made some good arguments for why you didn't want to use, let's say, European languages because they can study a little bit more. Do you think there's a difference in the actual language when you talk about switching between L1 and L2?
Yeah, so I think language encompasses a few different things, right? So I think Anne in her previous question was also starting to get at this. You know, where is the culture part? And I think when we think about expressivity in culture, then we think that, okay, language might be a proxy for certain cultural norms, and therefore we might see the greater difference in a language like Chinese. But there could be differences, but from what I gather from the literature, I think that really understanding is, you know, Asian context in which you acquired these languages, and how does that play out in terms of your emotion expression later on in life. So I'm more for the argument that this would show in different languages all across, but there could be a cultural effect that adds on to the language effect. Steve.
So this is a question as to how micro could you get?
Yeah.
So just looking at the task, Shane or some of the slide you had,
Yeah.
I'm doing this task, my kid's doing this frustrating yet fun puzzle, I may be switching languages, but I'm looking at my kid
Yeah.
throughout. So do you have a more complicated repeated measures time series as to language switch contingent on kids affect and the parents noticing of that, which
Yeah.
leads to language switch? And have you
Yeah,
got into
yeah.
that level of coding?
So not yet, and that's why we have to start with this HLM place, because I am really interested in the time series analysis of this, or really bringing into this, you know, what's happening before and after the switch specifically, and then taking into account what is the child's emotion expression throughout that. And I do have some of the child data, but in terms of the time series, given that these switches are happening so fast, and even if I were to be able to identify this is the emotion before switch, this is the emotion after switch, then there's still a lot of switches happening after that, so I have not been able to tease it apart. And if anyone has expertise in terms of looking at the time components of this, I really would love to learn more. Yeah, right, I know. And I think we've tried, but I think we've gotten a little bit stuck with the fact that these are global ratings 0, 1, 2, 3, not, 0 to 100 on a continuous. And so I think maybe if we were to think about how to improve this using something like a continuous emotion rating scale, a dial, rather than categorical, or these are things I'm thinking about right now. Yeah.
Terrific talk, and I also come and to you as well, John. I wonder, you have two explanations. You said two things might be happening here. One is that you're overwhelmed, it's frustrating, your emotion, and so your resources are tapped, so you switch to your easier language. It takes less capacity. And then the other one was, though, that, and the one you wanted to, it sounded like you wanted to test in your future directions, was that language switching may serve as a regulator of emotion. So, in any reason why you're kind of more want to go in that direction rather than manipulating emotion and see if that increases switching?
Yeah, that's true. So I actually think both processes are happening, and that comes from quite a bit of the literature on these different degrees of emotionality with first and second language. And I think for me the literature that captures it really well, I think, is looking at code switching within psychotherapy situations. And they say like clients have a tendency to switch into their first language when they feel angry, but switch into their second language to talk about sex. And I think that's interesting in that this sort of quick bottom up, like automatic emotion, it might actually be dysregulating. So emotion might be dysregulating language. But then maybe more in these low arousal negative states where we can have this top-down control, but in those moments maybe we can actually use that second language to control the emotion. So I think both are happening, and in terms of why would I push more for the down-regulating negative emotion? I think because I still think of language as a tool to be able to control emotions, and going back to this idea of immigrant paradox, these are populations with certain vulnerabilities, but they also have protective factors, and one of which can be bilingualism, and so I'm wondering if that can be a tool to help facilitate. So I think that's my personal Jocelyn.
So this is a follow-up to Anne's comment about your interpretations.
Yeah.
So with all of the Latino patients that I work with, I would say 99% of the time they want to express an emotion, they switch to Spanish.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're down-regulating or they're upset, but it's because in the Spanish language there's more words to express. For example, for happy there's 4 words to express that emotion. So I wonder if it's something similar with different languages that have larger, adjectives for emotion.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because I have been focusing on the Asian sample, and in Asian cultures there's actually fewer emotional words. So yeah, it's all very interesting. But just forgot. I'll come back to it. Yeah, I'll come back to it. Steve.
I'm just gonna follow that on target because we're almost out of time, but I don't know what lag you use in terms of feedback for these micro analytic time series, but I sure wanna know at the end of that 5 or 7 minutes how the parents and the kids affect ends. There's a big literature in parent-child interactions about you do the actors or you do the fake argument or whatever, and if you can end that interaction on a positive sort of resolved note, that's predictive of a lot of things in that family's life and the kid's life out of school. So I would certainly want to get a good measure of that.
I might want to follow up with you. Yeah.
So we are, I think, going to run out of time here, which is really unfortunate. So I'm going to make a recommendation because I think we've heard 3 exceptionally good talks. And really, if I have a hope out of this, it's that these guys have now given you a foundation for a lot more dialogue and collaboration with them. And for those of you following in the footsteps, you have some tough role models, but now you also know you have some really good coaches to help you through this process. So, huge thank